I gotta say, New Amsterdam Radio is brought to you in part by Anchor FM. Have you ever thought about making your own podcast? You see, when I was trying to get this podcast off the ground, I had a lot of questions. How do I record an episode? How do I get my show into all the apps people like to listen? How do I make money from my podcast? And most importantly, I don't want to deal with cables and wires and all those things. You see, the answer to every single one of these questions is pretty simple. Anchor. Anchor is the one-stop shop for recording, hosting, and distributing your podcast. And best of all, it's 100% free and ridiculously easy to use. And you can use your phone, which is pretty awesome. Now, Anchor can match you with great sponsors who want to advertise on your podcast. That means you can get paid to podcast right away. In fact, that's what I'm doing right now by reading this ad. So if you ever wanted to start a podcast and make money doing it, go to anchor.fm/start. That's anchor.fm/start to join me and the diverse community of podcasters already using Anchor. That's anchor.fm/start. I can't wait to hear your podcast. Hey, Flobo here. Before we get started, I just want to say New Amsterdam Radio is, of course, sponsored by newamsterdam.com. That's K-N-E-W, Amsterdam.com, where the flagship product, the Notebook One, has been celebrated all around the planet. Get yours using the promo code RADIO, that's R-A-D-I-O, and receive 30% off your first order. That's newamsterdam.com, and the show is called New Amsterdam Radio. Let's do this. Hey, it's Flobo Boys. New Amsterdam Radio is the program. Before I get into today's episode, I want to say thank you so much for listening and sharing and telling your friends about New Amsterdam Radio. We're still on the process of building a digital home for the podcast. Stick out for that. But in the meantime, you can always direct friends over to newamsterdam.com and also a little spot on the web via Instagram at New Amsterdam. Today, though, I want to talk to you about lore, not the podcast lore, which is something I do recommend if you haven't checked it out already. They're not paying me to say that. It's not a sponsored post or anything, but today it's talking about lore, and that is the story behind your product, your service, your brand, if you will. See, the thing about branding is there was a time where that word was only used for products and services. But now I think we all, as individuals, have co-opted that word to apply our reputation, our personality, how we interact with people. That's our brand, our personal brand. And maybe I just might have an episode about that later on. But no, I'm talking more today about the lore, the story, the personality behind an actual product or service. This summer, I was working with other clients as a freelance brand builder, and I inadvertently fell back into my love of video games. I had an Xbox for the longest time, and it was basically my Netflix player, my WWE Network player. But I dusted off some video games, and I've gotten back into it. I play Rocket League almost every day now. It's a good stress reliever. But namely, the one particular game that I thought I would never get into, even though I bought the disc, but I have been going in full tilt, is Overwatch. For those of you who don't know, Overwatch is a battle arena kind of first-person perspective shooter game-ish. It's hard to describe. It's definitely, if you're used to first-person shooters, that's kind of the interface. But you're on a team and you have shared objectives, and those objectives can change. And the art style is very colorful. I mean, there are like digital blood, and there are digital fights and arrows and guns and sword play. But if you didn't know any better, you would think as if this show was in the Pixar world. That kind of like smooth, 3D rendered, almost cartoonish graphics, almost not. One of the things I've noticed with that game, though, is that it has its own backstory. I mean, it has its own backstory. It's alluded to all the time. And what's noteworthy is that the game contains 2 or 3 dozen characters, and every character has their own reason for being in the game, obviously. And 2 or 3 characters, and every character has its own reason for being in the game. But there are a little bit of these short films that drill down on one character, and they go into that character's backstory. Not the whole story, but just enough to pique interest. And the reason why I'm bringing it up today on this edition of New Amsterdam Radio, also not because the game is somehow sponsored or affiliated with the show, is that I personally watched every single one of these character-driven videos because I was full into the story, full into the gameplay. And I would see on comments on YouTube and say, other commenters would say, I want a full movie of Overwatch. I want a full movie about this character. And I'm pretty sure that platform, that intellectual property, can do movies for years. But to me, I thought it was kind of clever that even though there's bits of story here and there, it's basically been a fractured experience. You'll have to play the game or trade theories with your friends or listen to product announcements and watch these little clip videos that drill deep into the backstories of a character, which is a risk because it could be just seen as confusing and people can reject it. But the game is so popular, the Activision Blizzard, the developer team behind the game, can really take their time to roll out what they think the story is. Prequels and sequels and all of that. And to me, I thought that was really fascinating. You see, we look at new products and new services. Think of your friend that wants to launch an essential oils business. I think a lot of us are making the mistake now in the pursuit of being seen as unique to give everyone the entire lore at once. It's, oh yeah, we don't sell ice cream. This ice cream will help build orphanages in a third world country if you buy a pint. Oh, we just don't sell jewelry. These jewelry pieces are made with labor from children and those who are recently out of work. So every time you buy a product, you help support somebody else. And that's great. I'm not saying don't do that. But a lot of times I really feel the story can be unfurled over a certain period of time at some mistake. Now, as I just previously mentioned a couple moments ago, there is a downside to that. You can always roll out things over time, but if you are rolling out things too slow, it can be seen as a mystery, or even worse, a uninteresting mystery. Here's a personal example. A friend of mine was launching a poetry book. So glad for the guy. He wrote poetry every day. That was kind of his thing. And for weeks, he was on social media saying, hey, I got an announcement for you. I'm telling you in 15 days, in 14 days, in 12 days. That is a bit of the lore. It's like, what's he talking about? What's the announcement? And the thing is, and the sad and tragic part about that is, it didn't work in his case, only because he wasn't established. It wasn't like if The Rock or Richard Branson said, I got an announcement for you in 7 days, stick around. It was a guy that was in my personal network as a guy who just wrote poetry. So there is really no right or wrong way to build your lore, to roll out your lore, to perfect your lore. It really is an issue of trial and error. When New Amsterdam was first started, we were founded by an unseen mayor of the city. So because New Amsterdam definitely is a city for creatives. For those of you who have an idea, those of you who are sparked by creativity, you do have a little bit of a place here in New Amsterdam. That's not going to change. But the idea of it being owned by a shadowy figure who didn't have a name called the mayor was definitely a bit of whimsy, right? An Imagineering, to steal a term from Disney. That part was not authentic. That was definitely something that was manufactured to be grafted onto this idea of what New Amsterdam was. And over time, I realized it really wasn't helpful for the brand or anything like that. Now, this show is not supposed to be about us, not supposed to be about what New Amsterdam stands for, but definitely something to consider when you are working on your own creative project. How much time out from the release do you build up buzz? How much of backstory and forward story do you release around your product or service? And that's something to really consider on whatever endeavor you decide to partake. Now back to Overwatch. There's Overwatch League. You can play this game professionally as an esports athlete. You can buy merchandise. I was just in the costume shop a couple weeks ago. We are recording this a few weeks out from Halloween, and they had Overwatch characters. You can buy their costumes just like the video game. Definitely there's enough groundwork there for years to build story around this game for a long time. And it's very fascinating because you think about games, especially digital games, how they're usually updated or changed or abandoned for a newer version. But then you have this story that commits it to be evergreen. So let's say they have a new series and they call it Overwatch X or whatever. They can still build on something because the lore is bigger than the individual product or service. It happens a lot with cartoon characters like Warner Brothers and Disney. We love Mickey Mouse, but if Goofy has a short, it doesn't hurt Mickey any. You know? I want to say thank you so much for tuning into this edition of New Amsterdam Radio. We are building an empire, one podcast episode at a time. Please visit us over at newamsterdam.com and tell a friend about the show and follow us on Instagram at New Amsterdam. Creative people do have a place in New Amsterdam and all over the world, so please support your friends who are doing things that are creative. Support even people that you may not think are friends, but someone you may know tangentially or tertiarily. Go out there, see live entertainment, buy a product, tell your friends about it, because that's how things grow. That's how things build. And until next time, catch you later.